And we're live now, so good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to Ubuntu on Air. My name is Jose, and I'm an Ubuntu member broadcasting live from Peru. Welcome to this Juju Charm School. Today we're going to cover the topic of debugging hooks. I'm here with the Juju ecosystem team, so just go ahead.
All right, let's do a quick round of intros. Left to right, go ahead and start, Chuck.
Greetings, my name is Charles Butler. I am a Juju charmer.
You go next, Corey.
Yeah, my name's Corey Johns, and I'm a member of the solutions team.
You're technically next, George.
Oh, I'm George Castro. I'm also on the ecosystem team.
And then it's Matt.
All right, I'm Matt Bruzek. I'm a Juju charmer.
I'm Marco Cheppi. I'm a Juju charmer and also on the solutions team.
Yeah, so I just realized the left to right is not consistent among everyone, so we didn't go in order. But that's fine, that's fine. So today, we're going to be going over debugging hooks in Juju. So a Juju charm is basically a bunch of metadata that kind of defines a service, and then a bunch of hooks that execute. Depending on what you're trying to do and how complicated the service is you're trying to write a charm for, hooks can either be very complicated or very simple, depending on what you're trying to do. So we're going to talk about different ways you can debug hooks. This is especially important when you're trying to talk to multiple services and things like that, and you're trying to pass around a lot of information between services and things like that. So the way I was thinking about doing this, Chuck, is let's start with the first hook that gets fired off. So you type Juju deploy, and the Ubuntu instance fires up on the cloud. We have root on the instance. Juju, the agent, is installed at that point, and it starts to execute hooks. And the very first hook that gets installed is the install hook. So why don't we start with the install hook, and then from there we can go to things like config changed and whatnot. So.
All right, that sounds brilliant, George. Thank you for the intro. I just gave a quick tree to show everybody that we are in our local charm repository, and I have one charm existing, but I'm going to take a step back from that, and we're just going to do charm create. I'm going to use a bash template because those are nice and simple, and I'm going to call this target. Reason that I'm creating this charm is so that we can take a look at this from, typically in my charm development workflow is I will often remote into the unit and actually start building my charm there. So this is, at its core, hook debugging. At that point, I'm writing the charm on the service. So if I look at the target charm, we see that we've got all of these template, hooks for us. So in execution order, we're going to see the install hook fire off first. This is what Juju is going to pull up and say, this is everything I need as a prerequisite to get started with installing this service.
Okay,
so
slow down here a second. Hold up. All right, so first of all, can you talk a little bit about the directory structure that you have to have when you're writing a charm? Because I think people tend to forget that. And do I have to use all of these hooks here, or are hooks optional?
Those are excellent questions, George. The actual directory structure that you need to have is you're going to create a directory name that is going to mirror the name of your charm, and then there's also a hooks file, a metadata.yaml file. Those are the only two required things to have. Now, your charm's not going to be very useful without anything else, but that's all that's mandated that you have. So running through this, say that you don't need to install anything on the system, that you just want to configure some system-level configuration on the unit. You could theoretically just set a config YAML, a metadata YAML, and a config changed and take the proper actions within that hook. So with that little bit aside, I'm going to go ahead and edit the install hook. Let's see, target, I believe, vim hooks install. Now the template gave me a little helper here of trying to install target. I don't know what that is. So what I'm going to do here instead, to make sure that I can actually get into this unit with debug hooks, is I'm going to cause it to error on purpose. Now the reason that I'm doing this is once I deploy this service, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to deploy my target charm. I'm going to pass it a relative file path. I'm going to call it local trusty target. What this is doing now is it's read the charm that I just created, and it's going to deploy it. And if I watch the Juju status output, we're going to see that it's going to come up from pending, and then it's going to immediately go into error state. Now, this is why I put that return 1 in there, because I want to capture that install hook. It's going to run through extremely fast, and it's going to be very difficult for me to attach to this unit if I don't have it implicitly error. Sometimes I'll connect in time enough to reach config changed, other times it'll be started, and that's not really useful to me because I want to start from square one. So once this unit decides it's going to come up, we see that it's errored. So I'm going to say Juju status target just to get the full info output, and you can see here that it's going to tell me that it actually failed within the context of the install hook. Now that's important to me because this brings me to the next command that I'm going to execute, which is Juju Debug Hooks. I'm going to say target 0. I think I need a tack in here. And this is going to run through the rigmarole of connecting to the machine, and it's going to dump me into a tmux session. Now this is very useful. This is essentially like a very stripped down shell that's on the box. And what we see here is that by default we're not in anything meaningful. We're literally just in a shell. And if I type pwd, I see that I'm in the Ubuntu directory. So the next step in this sequence is going to be passing Juju resolved retry, or just tack R, target 0. Now, I specify the name of the service and the unit ID of that. So if I have a scale-out situation where I've got 3 units, I would put the respective unit number after the slash. So what this has done for me is if I tab back over to my tmux session, I see that in the title here it says install. This is telling me that I'm running within the hook environment of install. And what's brilliant about this is that I now have all of the amenities available to me that Juju exposes. So if I say config get, it's going to tell me all of the options that I have available in that charm, what's set, and what Juju is going to be using for those values whenever it runs. And I can run this hook interactively. So I see that I've got a syntax error, and I am going to edit the install hook, and we're just going to say, we're just going to do echo installing, and at this point our hook is resolved. I have made it return 0. If I do, it's going to tell me that has a return code of 0. Let me go back in here and just illustrate that real quick by reintroducing. This was a syntax
where exactly are you running resolved retry on? You should make this clear, what unit you're running that on.
Good point. This is on my workstation. Now I'm using BYOBU, which is similar to tmux, so I can have multiple shells open. This is the equivalent of opening another terminal window on my workstation that I'm writing my code on that's communicating. It's my Juju workstation.
Okay, so not the remote unit.
Correct. If you see the green bar, you're on the remote unit.
Got it. Okay. Just wanted to make that clear for the audience. Continue.
Right. So now we see that we've illustrated the difference in what Juju is detecting as an error. If I get a response code that's anything greater than 0, Juju is going to panic and halt execution and trap it in that hook. So this is a great way for us to get started. At this point, we can now start running through and writing hook code for installation of any of the prerequisites we need, such as apt-get update, apt-get install, my service. So the next step in this sequence that's important to me is looking at things like actually checking out configuration whenever we have configuration issues. So I'm going to Juju destroy machine. Actually, I'm just going to leave that up. And let me cd into MediaWiki. And let's use this as our test bed. So we're getting all of these configuration options at the very top of the script. We're saying that we have a wiki name, and it's going to be config get name. So if I were to change this to, say, lname, deploy repository equals relative path, I introduced an error into that hook code, and this is going to give me some behavior that I'm not going to expect. So if I say Juju set MediaWiki, I believe it's title. Don't look at hooks. Look at config. Name. Okay, so I changed the name to lname, and this is a configuration option that Juju has no concept of. And whenever you attempt to retrieve that from the environment, it's going to return a null character. So we essentially don't have any config, and I'm not going to understand that as an end user. If I visit Juju or I say Juju set MediaWiki, name equals my awesome wiki, I'm going to expect to see that as the title of my wiki, but with the deployment that we just set, we're not actually going to see that. So again, enter Juju Debug Hooks. here, and I'm going to watch a Juju print. Let's see where we're at. So we should be, and it trapped me in the config changed hook. So now, whenever I type config get, I see all of the options that I specifically have sent. If we take a look at name, we see my awesome wiki. So we did indeed trap that, and we have all the values available to us. Now with the MediaWiki service, go ahead and run that. You can see that it's going to continue execution. That's why understanding that Debug Hooks is an interactive way for you to introspect your environment and retrieve values is such an important factor in charm development. So since I don't want to introduce a bug, we're just doing that to highlight. I'm going to go ahead and run it. I'm going to type exit, and you're going to see now that I get dropped right into the next hook in sequence, which is the start hook. And this isn't actually going to do anything because we don't have a start hook. So I exit, and now this is going to bring me to my third point, which is going to be debugging relationships. This is something that confuses a lot of new users. Whenever you go and you start working with relations, it's kind of difficult to understand what's coming over the wire, how you can get at these values, and what you need to do with them. So I'm going to do a Juju add relation. Now notice that I'm still in my debug hook section, and this is a great thing for you to do if you're deploying a service and starting relationships. So I'm going to Juju add relation, MySQL to MediaWiki. I'm going to go back over to my other screen, and we should see this relationship sequence get started. So at this point, I'm in the joined hook. This is a hook that's specific to taking any kind of action that you need to against the environment before the relationship has been established. So if you're, for example, joining a MySQL database, you might need to install client libraries for that, whereas if you're joining a Postgres database, you might need to fetch libraries for that as well to communicate with the service. And there is no database relation join, so we can safely skip this hook. And now I'm going to type relation get. So if we see here, this is everything that Juju just sent across the wire for my service to consume and then connect to the MySQL database. What's brilliant about this is I didn't have to go look through any code. I simply entered a debug hook session and got within the relationship context, and I now see everything that's available to me. This is very akin to config get, which we talked about earlier, which is going to expose all of the configuration options localized to my charm. So now if I run hooks db relation changed, we'll see that it runs through the templating. It's going to set the proper PHP configuration values. And at this point, it's actually going to start firing up my service. If I exit out of that hook, it should be done. And I'm going to Juju status MediaWiki. Let me just curl this URL. This validation that our service is up and running. Oh, that didn't give me what I want. And we're not doing anything over here. Hang on. 0, 9. Okay. Well, not sure why my curl command didn't give me anything, but I have a browser here that I'm going to share as soon as I figure out what I did with the Hangout. There we go. And there we have it. Our MediaWiki installation is here. My awesome wiki is indeed the title. And we have stepped through very rapidly, might I admit, and I apologize for going so fast, that we have we've successfully looked at all the different hooks that are available to us, how we can get in there, and how we can kind of introspect that environment, and how to get the information that's coming across the wire. So an important thing to note is that since I was showing all of those commands within context of the relationship hooks, let me drop back into my console. And if I type, notice the green bar, so we are running as a regular bash shell on that remote unit, and I type relation get, I'm not going to receive anything the machine doesn't actually even know where that command exists because all of this is controlled within that hook context. So same thing with config get. All right, and that's all that comes to mind with relation to debugging hooks. There are other things that you can do. For example, if you're working with a Python project, you can install PDB and place that in your source tree and run it through like an interactive debugging shell and things of that nature. But that's the basics of how to get in there, what commands are exposed to you, and what your environment's going to look like. Any further questions, George?
None from me. Any comments or questions from our esteemed panel?
Well, if the audience has any questions, just make sure to pop them into #ubuntu-on-air on irc.freenode.net. We'll read them aloud, and any of you guys can answer those.
Yeah. And the rest of the guys on the panel, I know Matt, Corey, and Marco, you guys have some experience debugging hooks, lots of experience. Do you have anything to add as far as what we've gone over so far, or tips or tricks or a mistake that you've made that might help the next person?
Yeah, one of the biggest mistakes I've made is making a bunch of fixes to a charm on a system and then getting it all working in debug hooks and then forgetting to copy my changes locally and then weeping silently after I destroy my environment.
Okay.
It's kind of a dangerous thing as you're making changes to it. So hopefully one day we can resolve something. Hopefully one day there will be a solution for us to fix that. But until then, just remember to copy your changes down.
I see what you did there. Okay. Any other comments before we move to Corey basically fixing all of the things for us all at once?
I wanted to mention that it's usually common to it's pretty common to see a hook failing because of a dot or it would be just a letter. As Chuck mentioned, instead of writing name, writing L name could cause a huge problem. So make sure that you're writing the correct words and you're writing the correct commands with the right punctuation.
Okay. All right. So now that you've explained all that, kind of how to do it manual and everything, Corey came along and basically says he can fix all of your problems. So with that, you're calling this DHX, Corey, right? So
yeah. So a lot of the common problems that have been mentioned, like forgetting to copy down your changes and losing them. Also, Chuck showed using a debug hook session just by himself, but you can also, using import ID, open up a debug hook session to another user, but it can be a little bit, you have to remember the exact syntax and everything to do a shared debug session. So, and also another common complaint that I had was the tmux key bindings for the default debug hook session conflicts with some of the bash shortcut keys for like Control A to go to the beginning of the line and stuff like that. So I worked on a plugin that you can get from github.com/juju/plugins, and it kind of solves a lot of these common issues. Hold on one second, let me post this. The link is in Ubuntu on Air and #Juju. The plugin is called DHX for short, or Debug Hooks EXT for Debug Hooks Extended. So let me go ahead and share my screen and I will show you what it looks like. Is that showing up? Not showing up for me.
there it is. Yep.
Oh, that's okay. All right, so I've already deployed an environment here on AWS that has a couple of services. One of them, this is another plugin, Juju Print, which is going to be folded into Core down the road, but it's a more succinct version of Juju Status, also available in that same URL. You can see that I have deployed the Camilo charm, which is a Python version of the Camilo charm that Jose created that I've been working on, and I intentionally introduced an error. So first off, I will show you the Juju Debug Hooks ext help. Show you all of the many options that this plugin supports, including things like setting up a custom config so that your environment will be customized the same way every time you connect to a new debug hook session on a new machine. It will essentially automatically configure the machine and set up whatever customizations you have defined to make the environment suitable for you to work in. That was the other big feature of this that I neglected to mention, was that it can set up the environment so you have your specific configuration, like your Vim config or your bash config, all configured exactly how you like it, so that you're not just working in a fresh, clean, uncustomized environment. It also has options for syncing down the changes, restarting the hook that's in error, joining a shared debug hook session, authorizing another user to join your debug hook session, etc. Let me show you the config file, which is usually under Juju debug hooks rc.yaml. And so you can see I have it set up to import my own SSH key from Launchpad. I could change this to lazy power to allow Chuck to connect to my environments. You can also specify this on the command line for a one-off shared debugging session. I switched it to use the default tmux key binding, so Control B is the key instead of Control A. I have a custom init script, which is all it does for me is install IPDB, which is very useful when debugging Python hooks. And then it uploads my Vim config and Vim directory so that I have all my fancy Vim configurations already set up. And whenever pulling down files from the remote unit, after doing a debug session, it will ignore PYC files, compiled Python files, also .hidden files. You can, a lot of times charms will create files within the charm directory that aren't part of the repository. So this allows you to skip those files. So anyway, so now let me show it to you in action. So you can do Juju debug hooks ext, or more shortly and pithily dhx. So I'm going to tell it to restart the failed hook. Let's see, what does that do? dhx help. Juju dhx. Restart the hook that it's in error. Import lazy power into the environment, and sync the changes after I've made them. So it's going to, so I forgot to tell it which unit to connect to, so instead of just telling me that it couldn't figure out what I wanted to do, it lists the units that are there and defaults to the one that's in error. So go ahead and accept that, and it's customizing the machine, uploading my Vim config. Let's see. It'll take just a moment here to upload my Vim.
This is so nice, dude, compared to manually copying a bunch of stuff over.
Yeah. As Matt likes to point out, I customize the heck out of everything, so I couldn't stand anymore working on uncustomized machines, and so I had to do everything. So now I've got my config is uploaded. Everything's set up how I like it. It automatically dropped me into the install hook, as you can see here. So I'll go ahead and run the install hook, and it will take hopefully not very long bit of time because I moved the Well, that's taking too long. I'm not going to worry about that. Okay, so if I know the install hook is failing, so I'm going to go ahead and edit it, and you can see I've got my custom vim config, my colors, and my folding. I've also got my plugin here to open other files with fuzzy pattern matching and all the goodness that I'm used to working with in Vim. And then I see that this line here is obviously wrong, so I'm just going to delete that. Save it, run hooks install. It'll be fine. I'm not going to run that because it's going to take a little while. And then when I'm done, I'll exit. And now it's dropped me into the config change. That doesn't hooks change. Exit, drops me into start, hooks start. Does nothing. Exit, and now I'm no longer in a hook session or hook context, so I've finished all of them. I'm going to go ahead and exit my debug hooks now that I've fixed everything and it all worked all the way up. Now you can see it's syncing remote changes. The permission denied error is actually a useful thing. It tried to pull down a generated file that contains secrets that the charm uses, which we don't actually want to pull down, so that's okay. You can see it actually pulled down a couple of other files that I should add to my list of ignored files so that it doesn't pick them up in the future, but more importantly, it picked up my change to the install hook.
So Corey, that's when you were editing your stuff up in the debug hooks. That now you've got all that down back to your machine, so
Yep.
Marco won't have that problem where he
Exactly.
creeps softly after he destroys the environment. That's really cool. I really like this plugin.
Yeah, it leverages another plugin that is already in that same repository that Juju plugins on GitHub has a sync charm that you can do it manually, but I find that if I'm in a debug hook session, I'm almost always want to pull the changes down, so I just do TAC-S on there and it syncs it down automatically. I don't have to remember it.
That's awesome. That's very cool.
For the file changes, are you just syncing everything in the directory, or are you reading the file store that Juju has for the charm changes?
No, I'm rsyncing everything in that in the charm directory. So that's
Okay.
that's why it's picking up these files that were created during the work of the charm that are not actually part of the charm.
Sure. Cool.
They were in that directory. Any other questions?
I'm sure someone's gonna ask. You gotta paste bin your bash RC file somewhere for your PS1.
For my prompt?
Yeah. Speaking of customizations.
Oh, yeah. That's actually a library called Liquid Prompt. If you just
I have a link to it.
it's no personal customization that I've done on top of that. Although I have done some because I've got the Juju environment in there. Yeah. So it's on GitHub. I'll post it in Ubuntu on Air and Juju. So yeah, it's a really good prompt. It's got a lot of useful information. I did customize a little bit to add the Juju environment here, so you can see how many units are deployed. That took a little bit of fiddling, but I might write a blog post about that after I write a blog post about this plugin. Anything else? Anybody else have any questions or comments on this plugin?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Is there a way to couple? I know this might be automating things too much, but couple this with like a personal GitHub repository so that when you're doing like live debugging, you're not losing any changes as far as version control? Or is that something you wouldn't recommend?
Are you saying that you would? I'm not sure I understand the question. Are you saying you want to commit changes directly from the remote unit and upload it to a?
Yeah, to just like a repo somewhere.
You could potentially do that. Actually, I suppose if you added the .vzr or .git directory, from your local repo and uploaded that, it would implicitly initialize it as a
Okay.
as a repository. That wouldn't be terribly easy to do with this because the upload files functionality is in the config file only, so it applies to every repository. But
Okay.
it's something that I'll look into. How
Yeah, I was just wondering if you're doing like a serious amount of surgery or something, and you're like, man, I want to change this part, but not that part, and you need to look back in a log or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem like pulling up the repo history and everything would be useful.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering.
I mean, you have to be other implicit things you have to do, like copy SSH keys around and such in order to access your remote repo if you even could. I think it might be better decoupling that and just having better support for like remote mounting a charm or something.
Yeah.
But it's a good idea still, regardless.
Yeah.
I was just wondering.
All right. Like I said, I'm gonna write a blog post on our on the solutions blog, hopefully over the weekend here, and go into a little bit more depth on how to use this plugin. But I think it's been really useful just for my own personal use, and hopefully other people will find it useful to solve a lot of these problems.
Yeah. I use Debug Hooks a lot, and I think that it'll help out a lot. So thank you for writing that, Corey.
Mm-hmm. And I assume have you shown this to any of the core guys specifically tasked to work on fixing our debug hook workflow, or?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
So I should probably do that.
Yeah, I think it'd be cool to show Wayne what you've got going on there.
Yeah, maybe we can watch this term survey.
Yes. All right. So any other comments there? I'm seeing if Wayne is around so he can explain resolve retry a little bit better. But apparently in the new version you don't have to open a new terminal. You can just type it in the unit and Juju will do the right thing, which really helps me out for transient errors, especially where all you really need to do is a retry because something failed for some transient reason. So I find that very useful. So any other questions or comments or gotchas or tips or tricks or plugins anyone wants to show?
I did want to bring up that this is in the Juju plugins project. It's a pretty lightweight repo that helps to extend the functionality and make some users' lives easier while we pilot features that we'd like to end up in core. So if you're writing scripts to help automate your deployments or to help make Juju easier, feel free to contribute those back into Juju plugins. There's a whole bunch in there. I think there's something on the order of 10 to 20 plugins that exist currently, and some of them have actually found their way into core and will be released in the next release of Juju, which is quite exciting. But it's a great way to help show a need for a feature that isn't immediately in core, and you don't actually know how to write Golang, so you can't put it in core yourself.
Yeah, there's something like 17 plugins now, so those are starting to get really useful for people, including some I haven't seen here in a while. So maybe around February or so, it might be a good idea to go back and check some of these plugins and see what's available.
And Marco, you can write these plugins in any language, right? Python, Bash, whatever you want.
Yeah, we've done a couple of schools on them, but just to briefly recap, they're just executable scripts that start with Juju hyphen the command you want to implement, and they live in paths. So the repo tells you how to install the plugins and keep them up to date, and it'll just add something append to your path, this little directory full of these scripts. The scripts go from helping to clean up broken Juju environments, extending debugging with Juju Debug Hooks extensions.
Ooh, this is a good. Juju list is good. Just shows you the state of all your environments that you've deployed. That's a good one.
Yes, and whether they're bootstrapped or not. It's an interesting one as well. There's setting all to just blast set configuration options. There's pprint, which you mentioned earlier, which will be in core in 121. There's PDB for doing interactive debugging with the Python debugging library. There's
Juju Notify is really useful.
Git charms. There's a whole bunch of different workflows that are modeled within these plugins here. So totally.
All right, great. So let me just check IRC. Any other last questions or tips before we break for the weekend? All right, well, this wraps it up. Everyone stay warm this weekend, those of you that are cold. I don't know how the weather is down there where you guys are, but it is not warm here. So we'll see everybody. This is the last Charm School for this calendar year. We're going to go ahead and wrap up with all the holidays and stuff coming. And around the corner, we'll go ahead and do another call for topics and continue to do Charm Schools for things that people want to see. So if there's a specific topic you'd like to see us dive deep on, just let us know. Either you can contact me in #Juju on IRC or somewhere on the mailing list, and we can tailor the content as appropriate for you as you'd like. So with that, everyone have a good weekend. Thanks.
By the way, we do have another Charm School on December 5th.
Oh, we do. I'm sorry, I totally messed that up. Matt, you're doing a Charm School in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, limited
Okay.
network environments.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so this one's going to be for those people that need charms that don't pull the entire universe from GitHub and you run on a restricted network. We nickname those fat charms, so we'll go ahead and do that. So my bad, there is one more Charm School for this year, and then we'll go ahead and cycle to new topics. So, all right, we'll see everyone next time. This is December 5th, and I'll post I'll post a reminder on the mailing list. Thanks.
As always, this Charm School will be hosted at ubuntuonair.com. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/ubuntuonair, and follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/ubuntuonair for any future updates for any sessions we'll be doing. We also have community themes, Q&A, and some other interesting stuff it may be worth looking for you. So make sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter. We'll see you next time.